Good morning. Good morning. I hope everybody got some coffee. But thank you so much for joining us at the first World Women House. And we are super excited to host the breakfast with IMD. A little bit about World Women Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization based in Los Angeles, currently working in 20 plus markets. And our global mission is to invest in 1 million women by 2050. We do that by providing access to capital. We provide access to coaching. We build communities. And currently we are a community of 55,000 women globally. And there can't be a better time to host a breakfast for women and change how we see ourselves in the world and take our leadership to the next level. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for hosting this breakfast.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. So here's the agenda for the time that we have together. I will be, as I said, about 10 minutes just framing this issue, sharing some of the research that I've done on this topic. And then we will invite 3 other panel members up here to answer some questions and to talk with the audience about their experience being on boards or also being a gatekeeper for women onto boards as well. We then offer the audience to ask some questions. I always say at IMD, right, I'm one person, we're 4 people up here, we're 40 incredibly experienced people in the audience. So what I might do is actually feed those questions back to the audience, see if anyone in the audience first wants to answer them, and then I will ask the panel members to also contribute their thoughts. Then we will give some closing thoughts as panel members, and that should conclude the 9 o'clock hour. So, let me just take this down so I can see it better. So we know right now there's a push around the world to get more women onto boards, sitting onto boards, right? There's, as of this year, the 40% rule in the EU. But then there's also 1 woman on board rules in certain countries like Malaysia, the UAE, etc. And then there's also targets in other countries like Australia. So there's this push to get women on boards. But we know that diversity, sitting at the table, doesn't mean you have influence and impact. And so the research that I've done at IMD, along with my colleague Alexander Fleischman and Ruth Aguilera, who's a professor at Northeastern, is to say, okay, what really gives women the impact? Where do women have the influence? And also to say, what are some of the barriers for women to get this influence and to have this impact? So, if we're thinking about impact, and this is regardless of gender, there's a pathway to impact. And my research mainly, for the last 20 years, I've researched power. What does power mean? How do people get power in a system? How do power dynamics operate? And power in and of itself is not very valuable. What we want in the boardroom is leadership and then impact. And the path to leadership and impact is this. First, we get power, which is the capacity to influence and bring about change. Do we have the resources to bring about change? It doesn't mean we're always going to be exercising that capacity, but do we have that capacity? The second step then is to get status. This is people's recognition of your power. Do people recognize that potential that you have, and are they open to your influence? And the last step is then leadership. Once people recognize your power, then you can influence people to reach a common goal or a shared purpose, and then ultimately, we're aiming for the impact. And again, this pathway that I've studied is separate from gender. It doesn't matter if you're a man, woman, non-binary. This is the path to impact. Now, when I talk about power, I am not talking about this type of power. I'm not talking about the command and control, the harsh. I would call this the more masculine type of power. When I talk about power, I study power. I think about power like this. How do you harness the unique value that you bring in a system, and do people recognize that power? That's how I think about power. And power comes from many different sources in the non-executive boardroom. Some are the same as in an executive boardroom. Things like, what is your network? Where are you in the network? Are you a central player in the network? What is your reputation? What are people saying about you? Who are your allies? What is your background, your pedigree, your education? All of that gives you influence. But then there are some specific ones to the non-executive boardroom. These are things like, What organization are you coming from? What role were you in? Were you a CEO or were you in a more specialized role? That gives you power in the boardroom. How do you deal with conflict? Your knowledge or your acumen of finance. How good are you at reading a P&L statement? Really important in the boardroom is your connection to the chair. What is your connection like? Do you sit on certain committees? Do you chair those committees? So this is where power, these are the bases of power in a non-executive boardroom. And of course, these are, again, separate from gender. This is true for women, this is true for men, non-binary. What, though, in our research that we found is that there are certain barriers or challenges for women to getting these power bases. And these challenges center around these four areas. First of all, are the current stereotypes of women. So we judge everybody, regardless of gender, on two dimensions. We judge, first of all, are they competent? Are they able to bring about or realize a goal that they've promised? Can they be effective? That's what competence is. Can they be effective? The other thing we judge people on is warmth. And warmth is a label that the researchers gave it. I think about it more like integrity. Do we trust this person? Do we think that they have the right intentions? Do we think they're caring, that they're about other people, not just about themselves? And the good news is that female and male leaders in 2025, female and male leaders, at least that's the most recent research we have, are judged equally in terms of competence. Women and men are seen as equally competent, which is good news. The difference is on the warmth dimension. Female leaders are seen as less warm than male leaders. Less trustworthy, less caring, etc. And now this has changed. This research has been going on for about 20 years, and researchers are tracking that warmth dimension, also competence. And we see that men and women are converging, but still women leaders are seen a bit less warm than men. Why does this matter for the boardroom and for leaders? It matters for mainly two reasons. The first one is that we think about warmth as unchangeable. We think competence is changeable. People can become more competent over time. But we believe that people's warmth is pretty cemented. This is how caring or how ethical or how much integrity somebody has, and it's not changing. So we pigeonhole people in certain warmth ratings or dimensions. The other reason it's important is because we connect with people on warmth before we connect with people on competence. And as you probably know, leadership is all about connection. So this is one thing that often is a barrier for women to get the same power as men and have the same influence on the boardroom. The second one is the quotas. So there are no quotas about men. There are quotas only about women around the world, or certain rules about having one or wanting a certain number of women in the boardroom. And why this matters is because unlike men, when women step into the boardroom, oftentimes the first thought is, she is here because of the quota, or she is here because of the target. And so women, more often than men, have to counter that perception. The challenge is, however, is what I also heard from both men and women board members as well as chairs, is that women need to more quickly speak up. They need to show that they're there adding value before a man would need to do that. A man can stay silent for a little bit longer than a woman can, but they can't try too hard. They can't speak up too quickly, or they can't speak up like they know it all and that they have all the answers. So it's a very, very delicate balance for women to show why are they there, not just because of their gender, but they have to do it in a very nuanced way, a very delicate way. The third thing is that women are more likely to be subject experts. I said one thing that gets people power in the boardroom is their background. Just because of the numbers, the pipeline, men are more likely coming in either as a former or current CEO. That gives them more generalized enterprise leadership background. A woman is more likely to be specialized in her area and therefore more likely to be put in a swim lane to say, okay, this is her expertise, right? She's not as able to speak to the general topics because she hasn't had the same role or likely to have the same role as a man. And lastly, this was the most controversial one, the gender dynamics. On the positive side, we heard from many women who said men are more likely to behave in the boardroom when I'm around. Men are more likely to be vulnerable when I'm in the boardroom as well. And then on the other side, we heard some more controversial topics or controversial statements. Women saying things, and this is almost a direct quote, it's really good that I'm older, I'm married, I have kids, and I'm not very attractive because I can call up my chair and ask to go for a drink at night, and I'm not a threat to him or his family. And this was an extreme quote, but I heard variations of this, or other women who were younger and not married saying sometimes, yeah, I'm hesitant to ask another board member or the chair to go and have a drink with me or have a one-on-one meeting with me because I don't want to give the wrong impression. Now, again, I'm not going to put a value label, is this good or bad? But remember, or the way that I think about leadership is connect, then lead. If you're not connecting first, leadership is always a push. You want to connect so that there's a pull. When there are these dynamics, again, not saying if they're good or bad, it affects the connection. So the women that we studied in the boardroom that really do have that influence, the impact, they're able to connect, they do three things. What they do is, first of all, they influence through informational power. Unanimously, the chairs we talked to all said, my women board members come in more prepared than my man board members on average. They've read every document, they know their stuff, and this is how they connect through competence. But what's interesting is they also, though, connect through warmth. The impactful women, and this is not only my research, but other people's research with women CEOs, the most impactful women first show up as women in a very traditional way. And I'm happy to go into this later on in question. I'm going to do it quite briefly now. They first show up showing their warmth, their communality, their care. They ask people about how they're doing. They have side conversations that emphasize their interests in individuals. They also even emphasize that they dress to be feminine, to not try to be a man. And this is counter to some of what we heard, let's say, a decade or 2 decades ago with women saying, I feel like I need to be a man. We see that changing, and there's evidence of that changing. So they first show up as women, and then they feel licensed to show some of the more male, characteristically male traits, things like assertiveness, risk-taking, dominance, etc. And then the last thing we saw is that women tend to influence in the boardroom through asking questions. When you watch a board meeting, men tend to influence through advocacy, giving a position, and women tend to influence through asking good questions. And this also confirms or helps to reinforce the warmth dimension. They show curiosity, they challenge, but in more of a softer way than men, and that is how they have the impact and the influence. So as I said, happy to talk afterwards, more detail on this research. It's a very quick overview. But essentially, this process of gaining leadership and ultimately impact, despite some of the challenges, is about women showing these characteristics, the influencing through questions, the first showing up and being confident as being women, and influencing through the informational power, knowing their stuff. And again, I have opinions on, is this right or is this wrong? I'm not going to share that here. This is more of what we see, however, okay? And I want to introduce this as a start to the conversation we're going to have today about influence and impact on board. I'm curious if my 3 panelists have seen some of the same things or seen a different experience. We can talk perhaps about that. So let me invite my panelists, my esteemed panelists, up to the front of the room. We have Simone STEBLER, who is a managing partner at Egon Zehnder. We have Caroline BASYN, who's the Chief Digital and Global Business Services Officer at Adecco. And lastly, Marie Noël, who is a council member at Adecco and Associés. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. A professor at the University of Geneva and serves on several boards. Okay, so please, ladies, please join me up here. Thank you very much. Wherever you like, please. I think there is. Yes, there's one. Perfect. So before we start, I asked each of my panelists to introduce themselves. So maybe I can start first with Simone and work to
Happy to. Good morning. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Also, thank you very much for IMD allowing Egon Zehnder to co-host here today. So we're very excited, and it's great to see so many familiar faces in the room, and also my colleagues there in the back. So my name is Simone STEBLER. I lead the Zurich office for Egon Zehnder, and I have had the privilege and still have the privilege to partner with various boards, companies to bring new board members and as well as help them with thinking about their succession planning. And I'm very passionate about the topic we're going to approach today.
Thank you, Simone.
Good morning, everyone. Also glad to see this room and glad to be on this panel with those experienced women on boards. My job is I work for Adecco as an executive, and then I work for Proximus, or I serve on the board of Proximus, which is a Belgian company. If you don't know, it's the equivalent of, before it was called Belgacom, so the equivalent of Swisscom, but for the Belgian company. And have worked many years in terms of helping women develop themselves, especially in the CPG and in the retail industry here in Switzerland, but also for the whole digital community across the globe.
Good morning from my side also, very honored to be there. My background, I come from law and philosophy. I hold a PhD in law and a master's degree in philosophy and ethics. And governance is where all comes together for me. I've been involved in boards and governance since more than 15 years, doing some research and teaching, but most importantly in the boardroom.
Super. Thank you so much. So my first question, I mean, we have a very diverse panel, even though it is small, and we have both a gatekeeper to the board as well as women who serve on the board. So my first question is for you. In very consequential terms, what do you see as the main challenges for women who sit on boards today, and what are the opportunities? Maybe we start with Simona.
Can I start with the opportunities?
Yes, of course.
Okay, good. So I think, I mean, we are living in a very complex and chaotic world today. And I believe this is also to a certain extent leveling out the playing field in the board, because the old ways of finding answers, solutions is just not working anymore. And I therefore believe that female qualities, you know, listening, building connections, building this connectivity, sensing a room, holding a safe space can become superpowers in such an environment.
Thank you.
So if you take challenge and opportunities, they're equal in a certain sense, because a challenge can become an opportunity in terms of women on board. I mean, you talked about impact, right? Yeah. And I think it's the biggest impact. It's the biggest element, because what you want when you serve on a board, you want to be seen as useful, right? You don't want to be there because you're nominated, you have the status, and all of that. You really want to make sure that you make a difference. And certainly when you move from an executive role to non-executive, you also need to see the transition, because you don't execute. You need to influence, to ask the powerful questions, and so on. So for me, the biggest challenge is this transition, but while you still feel that you make a difference. Because if you don't make a difference, I mean, what's the purpose of being on that board, right? And so you said several elements, right? It's about information, about networks, about being up to date. And the most difficulty is not only reading the documents that you get, right? You get them typically on the Friday night, if you're lucky on the Thursday night, but you spend your weekend, your Sunday morning to read this. But it cannot be a one-time event where you spend the couple of hours to read the documents. It needs to be constant, that you keep yourself up to date of the industry, of where the company is acting, that you keep yourself up to date into the global environment, the geopolitical, that you understand what are the risks, you understand on top of your competency that you bring, you need to be up to date. And you need to do that explicit by acting and networking and reading what you need to do. And so for me, that's the challenge, is to keep yourself up to date, because the world is changing so quick that it's much more difficult, I have the impression, today than it used to be, 10 years ago. And then the opportunity is related to that, because if you do it and you take a competitive edge in that boardroom, because you bring additional components that maybe other people have not thought about. And then is when you see, maybe I could contribute to something, because the people say, good question. And then potentially the answer is not in the boardroom, but the answer will come afterwards. And it's important, right? So you also need to distinguish what is not important from what is important. Because the time is limited on the boardroom, right? It's not that we have extensive time. So you need to make sure that the time is well spent.
So before I ask Marie-Noelle to comment on that, when you say that, Caroline, fully agree, right? And this is one of the things we help at IMD leaders with. How do you make that executive to non-executive transition?
Yeah.
The nose in, the hands out now for the first time in your career. Is that any different, though, what you just said, for men versus women? I mean, wouldn't you say the same thing if we were just talking about board members in general? What do you need to do? Is there anything unique about that for women?
That's an interesting question. I think there is nothing unique, I think.
Okay.
But I think it's important that you do it, and certainly from the beginning, so that your voice counts. Because that's then the relationship, right, with what you were explaining before. Are you there because you're a number, or are you there because your voice and your influence and the thoughts you're bringing make a difference? So I would say no, not necessarily.
Okay, thank you. Marie-Noelle.
The challenge for me, specifically for women, is not about access to boardrooms, but is in particular about influence. And that's the reason why I think the topic of this panel is so important, because very often women are asked to join boards without having positions of power, as you named it before. So they join, but they're not chairing any committee, they're not chairing boards. And so it's more difficult for women to have influence and to really have influence without mastering the agenda, without mastering the flow of information, without having this capacity at the very beginning. So it can come with influence, but it's more difficult. That's the challenge. The second challenge I see is that governance is changing. We see that in the world. I think governance is less about diversity today. It's more authority, conflicts, and there women can position themselves, but it's very often less easy for them to be in such environments. Opportunities, I think, yes, we live in a world of unprecedented uncertainty. So there is really a demand for governance as a performance factor, better risk framing, better decision shaping. And this is exactly where women plays a role and are good at.
Fully agree with that, and I think it's a wonderful segue, Marie-Noelle, to the next question, right? As you said, we do see in the last couple of years a bit of a backlash from all the DEI efforts that we saw in the decade, 5 to 10 years ahead of that. I hear it, but I don't always see it in the clients that we work with, and we work with clients all around the world. I'm curious, are you seeing changes in how organizations are responding to this question of equality and impact in the boardroom or in the executive, non-executive boardroom? Or do you also believe it is merely talk and not actually substance? And if you are seeing changes, where are the changes happening?
You know, what worries me, Jennifer, about this is I feel with many female but also male leaders I interact, they started to control very much what they say, what they don't say, where they involve themselves, what type of initiatives they sponsor, they champion, etc. Whilst this might not have an impact directly on the women who are now more or less in the top levels. My fear is that depending on how this backlash will last, that it will have a negative impact on the next generation of female leaders.
And maybe also on male, right? Because we know role modeling has a big impact, right? So if you don't see, as we'll talk about, having males as advocates, right? If you don't see your male leaders that you look up to using certain language, promoting certain things, it might also have that impact on the next generation of male leaders. Thank you.
I'm convinced that actually women are better placed those days to influence on boards and have this impact than men. And I'll tell you why, and it's also a statistic that is equal for executive meetings or non-exec, because of the volatility of the world, the uncertainty, the enormous risks. Women don't tend to be too much black and white, right? And don't exercise their authority by control and power in the sense that you were explaining at one point in time. And I think due to this collaborative nature, due to this dialogue nature, they will have tendencies of managing through risks or through crises or through some very delicate topics in the geopolitical area in a better way. And I'm convinced personally that if there would be more women also at the top of governance and in some key decisions with companies of power, we would sit in a better world. And we would not forget about a certain number of important topics. And it's really interesting. So I told you I'm on this Proximus board, right? It's a company that is owned for 53% by the Belgian government. So it's also interesting dynamics, right? But the board is made 7 men, 7 women. 7 Flemish speaking, 7 French speaking, 7 nominated by the government, 7 not. Is it totally true? I mean, sometimes in transition periods, there is a little bit of deviation. And I know we have an English man on the board, so is he French or Flemish? I mean, I let you decide. But the fact of this parity and the fact that we have more women in this board than just the 3, you know, that magic number of 3 that we say before you can have influence, is really phenomenal. But what is disappointing is that some of those topics are always raised by a woman, always. When it's about, okay, gender diversity in the executive committee, okay, or a pipeline, or whether it's a ESG topic of any kind, and all, it's always one of us that raise that topic. And it's as if the men in the room are waiting until one of us raise the topic, and then the discussion is told. So, but I'm convinced we need more women just to get and live in a better world.
My view is a little bit more optimistic, but maybe a little bit more limited, because in the board, I sit on board in Switzerland, so mainly focused on Europe, let's say European countries, and most of them are listed. So I see in the engagement calls, I have off-season before the General Assembly. I speak with investors, I speak with proxy advisors, and their diversity is still in all discussions. So I cannot feel that the topic has reduced in intensity. And so these are power driving the behavior of us, company, towards diversity. Now it's a fact that it's a big pushback for certain topics coming from other regions in the world, especially the United States of America. And so how all this will come, it has been absolutely pushed back from day 1 to day 2 in the States, not yet in Europe, but that's we'll see how it evolves.
Mm-hmm. So in the companies that I work with, I tend to see a change in the the terminology and the labels, but not so much a change in the initiative. So for me, that's encouraging. But as you said, right, if the next generation doesn't hear this language and hear this promotion of certain topics, I do worry about how it will affect the next generation of leaders. What will they focus on? What will they emphasize? What will they think is important? For me, when I think about DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, the diversity, we're getting there, right? And I think we're on the right track. Where I focus always is the inclusion. And this is regardless of gender issues, right? We want inclusive boards because that's how the most, I think, the best governance happens, right? And when it comes for me to inclusive boards, it's so much also about what environment, we know this from the research that I'm doing, the environment that the chair creates, right? And is the chair acknowledging everyone, regardless of gender, on the board equally? Are they even doing something as simple as saying, you know, how is the seating happening? Are the same people always sitting next to me? Who am I looking at? Because we know this is about connection, right? Who do I see in front of me? And so when I work with companies, I'm always looking at what is that environment that they're creating to create that inclusive environment. I don't think necessarily this is becoming less important. And I do see as well, and I don't know if this is good or bad, that inclusiveness is being separated from diversity. And in some ways, I think that is good because I think that inclusivity is beyond just gender. It's beyond just, certain labels or demographics. What I also, though, have seen, and this is something I would only have said, I only see in the last couple of months, is that companies are coming to us and now saying it's about performance. It's about performance. And so I don't have an opinion on this yet because it's so new. But what I'm hearing from companies is saying we were so kind, we were so generous, we were so patient during COVID because we know people's lives were disrupted. We're kind of ready to get on from that now. We now have to think about performance. And so I don't know. I'm still hearing inclusion. It's going beyond gender, which I think is good, going beyond labels. I'm worried, though, however, what is this next year, 2 years going to look like? Because only in the last couple of years, I keep hearing performance. We're a performance culture. We're a performance culture. How do you help us become more performance-oriented? What impact that's going to have on inclusion, I'm not sure. But it's something that I'm listening for. It's a whisper right now. I hope it doesn't become a giant. But it might, yeah. So I'm going to ask a question now about, I shared my research about the women or the types of characteristics of women that I see as influential and impactful in the boardroom. I want to see hear what you see. And I'm going to start actually with Caroline and Marie Noel. When you see impactful, influential women in the boardroom, what characteristics do they have in your experience?
Shall I start?
Go ahead.
So, first of all, maybe what influence means. I think influence means making a difference. It's not about winning arguments. It's not about fighting for being right. Being influent really means having an impact on decision shaping. And what is it for? In a board, influence is there because we need to find the best way to make decisions at the highest level. Decision making is not easy, And so it's all about how do we come to contribute and to make sure we are taking the right decision and good decisions. And why it's not easy? Because it's uncertain. Decisions are uncertain, and much more now than in the past, I would say. So how can we be influential, and can we ensure that we are taking good decisions? I think influence requires credibility. You mentioned that. All I say is based on observation. I have not done as you have done.
That's what I want. I want your observation.
Okay. So credibility, a certain maturity in governance, and I may be a little bit provocative, acceptance of not being safe in a boardroom, acceptance of unsafety. We always hear, oh, it's good to have psychological safety. There is no psychological safety in a board. Because good governance, and it's not a negative point, good governance requires some tensions, require not to be in agreement all the time with everybody. Okay, so how do we gain credibility? There are some golden rules. I've observed that. I think first, of course, competence, but first, you have a very limited time where you can speak on a board. If you think about it, board are, in the board we are now the biggest board I'm on. We are 13 people, which is a lot on a transitional period. You have the management presentation, even if you require them to be not more than 30%, they occupy a lot of time. And then, so you have a limited time. So it's very important not to speak, to say nothing, Use your time very wisely. Second, there is a timing for influence. There are moments where there is very low impact. If you speak after a decision, if you speak after all the papers are done, and there are moments with high impact. And especially for myself, the moment with high impact, when there are crises, there you can really make a difference. Crises or difficult times, it's way easier to gain trust and credibility in hard times. What else? Oops. Okay, I have a lot of papers. And so that's about credibility. Maybe another golden rule is influence is very often very modest. It's being letting other take the conclusions for themselves, not talking personally, but trying to gain a collective ownership of a decision. And it's about question the question. It's all about framing the good questions. It's not about winning arguments.
You said a lot. I was going to mention the credibility as well. And the question is, how do you get the credibility, right? As an executive and a non-executive, it's different, right? Because it's true that as an executive, it's all about performance. And as a non-executive, it's what do you bring in the room? It's not about your current performance. It's what do you bring in the room. And where I see when you bring the outside in, it's super important. The other thing is I try to connect with some of the executives that are typically in the field where they require my input ahead of the meetings or afterwards. Doesn't matter because they're in any case regularly, so it's always ahead or after. Doesn't matter, but creating this additional value with whatever you learn outside, right? Because sometimes that is the perspective that they don't have. The connection you can get, you were talking about warmth, right? And you said women typically don't have warmth.
No, I said the perception.
The perception.
Perception is that female leaders are less warm.
And the reason I think
That's very
why you potentially said that is because we want to show professionalism, we want to show also this firmness, this directness, and sometimes it's perceived, you do the same as a man, and from a woman it's seen as, she's a little bit tough or harsh or this, while a man is doing 10 times worse and nobody reacts a minute about it, right? It's normal. And so that's why we have this perception. But in reality, it's not true, right? We really have this caring, which is kind of intrinsic, and those connections you make outside the boardroom are as important. So our chairman, I have probably the best chairman I could ever get. He connects always us as well for a lunch before the meeting starts. So the meeting starts at 2, and at 12, we're all invited to a wonderful lunch with Belgian food that I appreciate. But because I live in Switzerland, I didn't say.
But Swiss chocolate, of course.
I was on the Belgian dinner yesterday, and it was all Belgian chocolate, but new guys. But okay, let's get out of the chocolate. But the interesting thing is this connection that you said. Now, one thing I want to explain as well is, I don't know if you ever heard about the PI model. So it stands for performance, image, and exposure. Okay. So, and this is valid for executives. I learned that 20 years, 40 years ago when I joined P&G. You replace the performance by competence. You have been hired on the board because of your competence, and you know exactly why. Because they told you. Actually, boards make an analysis to see whether the sum of the board members have all the competencies they need, but you know what you bring. Sometimes you bring duplicate or triplicate versus some of your colleagues, but regularly you're independent. So for me, it's obviously the digital, the AI, the diversity element, but also the international element. Because it's all Belgians. Some have never left Belgium. I went to Switzerland, I lived in the US, I came back, I lived again in the US. I work a lot with Asia. I'm all over. So when you know this competence and you get that credibility, you can intervene on those topics. Don't worry to leverage that to the extreme, right? But the other elements of the PI model, so you replace performance by competence for non-executive, the image is, what is the image you have, right? Are you having an equity of capabilities? For example, an additional equity I try to bring is the big transformation. M&A is regularly a topic on boards, and whether it's large transformation, it's integration, or divestitures, you can intervene on those. So what is those elements? And then the last one is exposure. And then that exposure is presence in the room. So some of the meetings you can meet remote or face-to-face. We're outside COVID. So, all Belgians in Belgium, I always do the effort to go face-to-face versus being the only one remote. You cannot have any influence if you're the only one remote. There are sometimes meetings that everyone is remote. Okay, that's fine. But you need to be attentive to that, to go the extra step. To meet the people outside the boardroom as well, and create those connections, right?
Super, thank you. And in a second, I'm going to ask you, Simone, what do you look for when you are placing women on board? What characteristics do you look for, and what are the indicators that women have those? But I have to just respond to the psychological safety comment from you, Marie-Noëlle, because oftentimes I'm brought into a team, not so much a boardroom, but an executive team, and they say, we are super psychologically safe as a group. I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch you. And I get to sit in and I watch them. And what that often translates is to exactly what you said is not good. Overly polite. We're very nice to each other. We don't really want to make anyone feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, no, this is psychologically soft. You're psychologically soft. You're not psychologically safe. Right? True psychological safety is I can bring up the really tough issues that make people uncomfortable, and I'm not going to be rejected for that. I can bring up topics and I can challenge the chair, even if I know that he or she, more likely he, but he or she, has certain opinions on a topic, or the CEO is really married to some direction, and I'm going to say something that might not make people happy and make people uncomfortable. And yet I'll still be included, right? This is really about inclusion. To me, psychological safety is the foundation of inclusion. So maybe just a different definition. I think boards do need psychological safety, but true psychological safety, not politeness, not softness, not comfort. And that's where it gets dangerous, yeah? Mm-hmm. But Simone, what do you look for, and how do you know if a woman has it?
So let me first take a step back. I was actually reflecting on this quite a bit. So generally speaking, I don't look at female or male candidates for board positions any differently. So we assess whether there is strategic thinking, whether they will be able to drive results from the boardroom, how they influence, are they independent, and so on. Of course, I personally am very aware of my own biases. So whenever I interview, I am very aware of my biases. I surface them. So I think that's absolutely key. And then what I think we as gatekeepers where we can really have a systemic impact is when we assess the inclusiveness competencies of chairs and committee leaders. So that's where I believe we can have very, very important impact. Now to your question. I have had the privilege to interact with many experienced and very influential female board members. And I asked them, what makes you impactful? And it's quite interesting. Most of them said, I joined the board, I was there, and then I somehow realized I'm not having the same impact as some of my male colleagues. What did they do? They started to very closely observe what are the dynamics in this board and who are the people who influence the dynamics. And this goes back to having these conversations, making the connections outside the boardroom, inside the boardroom, and then also adapt. I think that adaptability and self-reflectiveness are also key here.
I would say when a woman is on one of the other committees, you know, there is the board, but for example, you can have the international committee, the digital committee, audit, obviously, nomination, compensation, and those things is you really can have more influence through the committee as well, because the committee is regularly a smaller group, and it's less constrained on time. And it goes deeper in a certain number of topics. And the question is, do women get the top jobs in the boardroom as well? Again, when you talk about executives, do the women get the line jobs, right? Do they get the CEO or the business P&L roles? Not always. And it's the same in the boardroom, right? Do women get the chairs of the committees? Or are they sitting in enough committees to be able to have influence, right? And so that's also an element that brings you more credibility once you're then in the board, because first of all, the chair of those committees always report to the board and has a strong voice, right? Because some decisions have already been taken in the subcommittee, actually.
Absolutely.
And, so it's
and also I mean, you
point.
see, right, we always say information is power. You see committees sometimes get information that the full board doesn't get, so they get extra information. I've actually talked to chairs who say, when I get a woman on a board, because I know that there's that question, oh, is she here because she's a woman? The first thing I do is I put her on a committee. And I make sure that we have equal representation of committee chairs that are men and women, so that we're also getting that impact. And for me, when we think about inclusive chairs, Simone, these are some of the things I hear. But also there's a power hierarchy of the committees, right? Many of the chairs I talk to are boards, they say, you know, audit is up there at the top. And then after that, it's nomination and remuneration. And then the other committees are a bit lower, the sustainability, the AI. If you have these kind of additional committees, they're a bit lower on the hierarchy, right? And again, these are just things I hear. And it's interesting how there is this perception of where do you get power, where do you sit on the different committees, where are you even sitting? I've even heard things like sitting in proximity to the chair communicates certain power. Very interesting. But I really appreciate when a chair says, when I get someone new, I put them right on a committee, especially a woman, so that she has a higher likelihood of having impact. Please.
Yeah, my experience is a little bit different.
Please.
It is very true that nothing can happen without a good chair of the board, I mean. And any initiative or any influence, try to go with the chair or exchange with the chair. I try to partner with the chair when I have topics. And I think it's fundamental. I think it's the one problem. If a chair is not inclusive at all, you can do nothing. Full stop. So you can just decide not to work in the board anymore, and there is not many options. But in the committee, I've never experienced a board where I was not on committees at the same time, at least one committee. And regarding the most influential committees, that's a good question. I don't think audit is the most influential committee. I've sat on many audit committee, audit and risk committee. Why? Because audit is most of the time very back-looking. So it's really a control position, and you see the company maybe 360 degrees, but it's not forward-looking. The most influential committees, honestly, in my experience, was a strategy and governance committee, where we had to deal with many very sensitive topics, defense, M&A, with important projects having been done there. Then we can have an opinion, is it good to have a strategy committee or not? And that's not the topic today. And nomination and compensation is also a very sensitive topic, because nomination is really key. And you have access also to the management. You have access. You said something very important. I think we don't realize that with what you said, with information, we tend to be better informed, or we do the extra effort to read all the documents 3 times, etc. But we do also the extra effort to take external information. I try, but I'm not successful always, but I try to give me a rule and to look every time I get documents, how much of these documents are internal purely, how much are external. And if the ratio is totally unbalanced, then I try to get external information.
That's a good point.
Very good point. And what I would also say is, I have a question for you, and then I think we have one more panel question that we have time for left before we turn to the audience. You said, Marie-Noelle, I tried to partner with the chair. How do you do that? Is it calling him or her up and saying, can we have a meeting? Is it somehow in the meeting having a certain dynamic with the chair? How do you do that partnering? Because it is so critical.
It's on a case by case, I must say, because also there are chairs that reach out to individual board members for certain topics, or to committee members for certain topics. And if I have a problem, I've been in situation, okay, I cannot say names, etc., but I've been in situation where at a certain point there was a lot of tension on the board, a lot. And the chair at that time was very emotional. Don't try to figure out names. I'm not in this board anymore. So, and how to deal with that. So the situation was totally blocked on the board. And I think it's about timing. It was not the right moment, because you have to protect the chair position, so face saving in a way, if I can. And then you try to talk with the chair, maybe on a one-to-one, or to find a solution that keep the position intact while proposing a way out. So how do you do that? It's a case by case. I think you all lived this, experienced this. It's when you have to be a little bit intelligent in the sense to understand the situation and find the best way out.
And I think,
the example, maybe to be more concrete, was that we had a very big project for the company, but the deal could not be done without conceding a board position to someone wanting to make the deal. And the chair kind of, with no meeting, promised, the position. So it created a situation where the other ones were shouting, we cannot do that, it's in no way we will do that. And I was at that time chair of the nomination committee. And so, of course, we cannot do that, So my proposition at that time, because the chair could not go back and said, without putting the deal at risk, And I said, okay, you come back to him. I'm the chair of the nomination committee. You tell him the process has unfortunately to go through me, and you organize a meeting with me. And I had lunch, 3 hours, 4 hours, or 3.5 hours lunch with this person, explaining him that he was not joining the board while trying not to break the deal. And okay, that's an example.
And I think, going back to the question of psychological safety, we know that there are certain key interpersonal dynamics like face saving that happen on boards. And it's always, whether or not you're a man or a woman, non-binary, that walking that line, maintaining that balance between understanding these key dynamics like face saving of your chair and saying, what does it really mean to have a psychologically safe board with good governance, is sometimes very hard. And as you say, it's a emotionally intelligent judgment you're making in real time, and it's a tough one. It's a tough one, right?
I have a point on this psychologically safety, maybe appropriate, maybe not, but let me try.
Please share.
You know what I told you, I'm on the boat where we are 7 women, right? And as you are the new kid on the block in the beginning, it's difficult to start putting your opinion, right? You don't understand the dynamics, but what you can do is support the point of somebody else on the board, right? And also, especially when it's a woman, you support, right? Obviously, you have to believe into what she says. You cannot just go because of the flow, right? And then that's not my typically way of working. So, but this whole supporting in the boardroom is super important as well. And according to me, that creates psychological safety, because then you see the dynamic that, okay, people are kind of building on your point, and then you can have influence and impact when people support each other, right? And not because you stay silent at the important moment where you also believe in the point and you don't emphasize the point, right? And I think we have a role between women to also create that in case there is a miscomfort. And again, I know I talk a lot about my executive life as well, because it has been the longest, right? I mean, but in a certain sense, early in my career, women would not support other women, right? I remember that very well. And the more senior ones would not try to drag. And now it has shifted. It has shifted. Is women are supporting other women. And I think it's super important that we keep that, and also in the boardroom, where you can.
And just to quickly add, there's a lot of research on what is called the queen bee syndrome. So do women try to allow themselves to grow, or do they support other women? And it's exactly what you just said, Caroline, that the more women there are in a context, the less there are queen bees, the more there is the supporting environment, the fewer women, the more there is the queen bee. So it totally supports what you're saying. I think given the time, we open it up for questions, and then we have a closing statement that we can each give at the end. Does that sound okay? All right. So please, yes, sir. And maybe state your name when you give the question. Yes.
So I'm very happy to be here. I'm learning a lot, and thank you, Caroline, for helping me to be here today. So just a bit of background about myself. So I used to be a board member. I was in the governance, risk, compliance.
Does everybody hear him, by the way? If not, you can have my microphone. Yes.
So Alain Ragueneau, I'm based in Zurich, and I used to be a board member, executive. And I was part of the minority. I was in the governance, legal, and compliance function. And just to reflect, it was really great in some boards to be with women because they were supporting me. Exactly your point, Caroline. So I have one question. I was listening to many conversations, and we speak about AI, AGI, and one of the things I hear more and more, we are living in a different world today. And I hear many board members, men or women, explaining that it's very difficult to understand the technical reality. So I will be very, very curious to hear you, does that change the dynamic of this gender influence and impact? Because not understanding the technical intricacies, how can you really make that decision? And one of the points that were made, like then to go and get the information where it is, and we are based in Europe, and things are very much happening in the US or in China. So I'm very curious to understand these technical intricacies, how do you manage that, and how does that impact the topic of today? Thank you.
As I promised, I would love to hear if anyone in the audience wants to first respond. Yes, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anat Barguera. I was a serial entrepreneur. Today I'm an investor in technology companies, cyber, a lot of AI, etc. And I was also on public boards. I live a lot the life or the relationship between technology and boards. And over years, I've seen different aspects of it. So I want to share a couple of points. First of all, I really believe in the point of challenges versus opportunities. And I encourage women to make themselves knowledgeable on the digital world and go with these huge developments of AI, cyber, everything that is happening to us, not only in terms of being more efficient or saving money, but coming with amazing disruptive top-line ideas when you sit on boards in order to make yourself very useful. I think it's a tremendous opportunity for women. And on the other hand, I ask myself how right it is always to take yourself as a woman when you are in this situation. Because if you want to be authentic and you walk into the room, in the boardroom, and you think, oh, I'm a woman, they look at me as a woman, I don't know if it works best for you. I usually had to tackle the situation of they put me on board and then they say, we have a cybersecurity expert. And nobody wanted to tackle it from the rest of the board. They'd rather look at P&L and balance sheet, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm saying there is a fine line there between saying women are like this and men are reacting to them like that. And playing it the other way around, walking into the boardroom and being gender blind and being very strong about what I know, what I can bring, and behaving the way that I am. I'm a person. So, or I'm a technology or digital capability, a thought leader, whatever, not me personally, but the way you present yourself. And not always, I'm a woman.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to?
Well, I mean, to come back to maybe a little bit a mixture of the 2 points, those days, the boards are not equipped, okay? And I work in a telecom, or I'm serve on the board of a telecom company, so they're mostly pretty technical oriented. But if I look at the board of Adecco, for example, it's another generation, except maybe with one lady who is on the board who is very knowledgeable about cyber, AI, and very digital. So what we decided is we decided to take the whole board to San Francisco. Okay, now it looks like very symbolic, right? You bring them to San Francisco, the land of AI and all of that. But it's more than just symbolic, right? And it's more than just the 3 days. It's the readiness of the board to invest in themselves to get to those levels. Now, the second question is, what about new board appointments, right? And I think, maybe I should leave it to you, there is much more a request of adding to the board those competencies, right? And I think if you have those competencies, you can put them forward. And if you wish to be on board, you have now a chance to be selected amongst all your other capabilities that you explained. So I don't know, maybe you want to explain a little bit how new appointments are looking towards people who have that expertise.
Yes, thank you, Caroline. I think I could speak for a long time on this one. Yeah. So only quickly, yes, it is indeed a demand, either for new board members with that type of experience, particularly transformational experience in that sense, but also for boards wanting to upskill themselves more broadly on these topics. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe,
yes.
If I can add on that one, I think anytime you have an information need or an education need, the most important thing at board level is to say, do we have there are two questions. Do we have internally in the organization the right capabilities at operational level? Are they understanding what's happening? And at board level, the same. Do we understand what's happening? And we should be at our strategic level. Where does it have an impact at operational level for operational excellence, for strategic? Is it changing our business model? And it's almost as important to know what you don't know and what you need to know, and without any bias. For the second question, do we think, oh, I'm here and I'm a woman and so? This is maybe a very personal comment, but I think it's there also very important to be aware of our own bias. And in the research, I don't know if you looked into education, because I think it has a lot to do also the way as a child we were educated with that. And we just need at some point in life to be conscious and maybe to make it differently with our own children if we have some. Yeah.
Yes, I have both a boy and a girl, and it's very interesting so early how they start to adopt certain gender roles and ideas of what men and girls and boys do, right? And I think that you talk about parents, I feel like we raise our children in a fairly egalitarian household. Both of us work. We both have in high demand jobs, but yet still children pick up amazing things very early. And we know that from a lot of the research in psychology. Maybe time for one more question. Thank you. One more.
I already took it, if you don't mind. So
Maybe the woman in the back.
I have my question.
Oh, okay, please.
Sorry, thank
Yes,
you.
no.
I'm Ruby. I work in semiconductor industries, and that's why it's very high demanding manpower areas. So for me, the entire journeys have been, I started as like technical background, and then when you're moving into business, you start to have to behave in a different way. So the personas have been changing within the entire dynamic, and all of my people was around me. So when it comes to certain situations, people always like consider me like very warm persons, very easy to discuss. But when it comes to certain technical things, when it comes to certain decisions, you have to hold your ground. You have to, as what Caroline have been saying, that we have to even making a point, making a major argument to say that this is the things we think need to be done. But people take it very differently, right? Because they always consider that you're the nice one, so how come you are now picking up a fight? And then the entire dynamics start to change, and then even within the group, the committees, they will consider your opinions differently. So for me, I had a certain time of struggles to go through that transition phase. I do not know how is your or everybody else's personal experience, how that have been going through, if there's anything we can share with each other.
Yes, would anyone in the audience like to contribute before we turn it to the panel? All right, then anyone on the panel want to respond?
I would say clarity, just clarity, and influence is like trust. It's an ongoing process, and it does not come at day one. So it requires time, and giving a signal of the clear intention towards people. Even if you are nice, you have to make your points clear, and that's the way I think they then adapt to you.
Yes.
I think in the board scenario, sometimes you're initially sought because of your domain expertise or your technical or your functional expertise. But once you're on the board, the goal is to act in an enterprise fashion, to think enterprise. So I think if you think about the fact that the way you got there does not necessarily impact how you influence once you're there,
That's a very good point.
is something to really think about.
Yeah. And you need to be seen as a business leader.
Right.
You
Not
cannot
a technical
stay
leader.
in your channel or whatever. You're
Exactly.
totally right. You're totally
That's
right.
very true. We struggled in the board because we had a person, no matter if female or male, that comes from a very technical and executive position and could not, at the right,
Yeah.
quite understand what was the right level of the discussions at board level.
And most decisions actually are not in your technical expertise or whatever subject matter expertise. Most of the decisions are company-wide. And you put your responsibility on the table. So one of the things we didn't talk, actually, you're accountable.
Liability. Yeah.
You're accountable for the shareholders. And I'm an independent director on the board I serve. And yes, there is the government, but there are the minority shareholders as well. And at the end of the day, you need to stay true to the mission of the company. And whatever mission is, and you need to be able to contribute to that. So we forgot that a little bit with our competencies and all of that. And it's super important because I suppose you look for that, right? You need to be able to read a P&L. You need to be able to contribute to M&A decisions. You need also to do and force the board in learning from the past. Because M&A has been done. What is the statistic? I remember Salvatore giving statistics in the IMD course about, 70% of the M&As fail, or maybe the number is bigger. Don't quote me on the number. But the number was way on and so often it's a good deal for the one that is acquired, but it's a more difficult deal for the one that acquires. Yeah. Do I say that correctly? Yes. So whatever. I'm going left and right, and we need to finish the meeting.
Do you want to add anything to that, Simone? Okay?
Yeah, so maybe on the topic of accountability, I think that is really a key one. And I don't have any statistics on this, but for my personal experience, I see that many women taking on a board position do much more due diligence on the company because they are very much aware of this accountability.
Yeah.
I'm going to give an answer that is kind of a case study. So one of the board members that I most admire, he's a board member of some of the largest publicly listed companies of the US. And what I've seen him do, which I admire so much, is he says he frames when he steps onto a board saying, I have one and only one responsibility here. And that's to ensure good governance for this organization, to support the chair, to support the CEO, to support the executive team, to make this the best company it can be. That's my only job. And to ensure that good governance is practiced. And so I'm going to do whatever it takes to do that. Yes, sometimes I will have the difficult discussions. Sometimes I'm not going to say things that is going to be easy to hear. But remember, I'm always doing it for this direction. And I think that, just starting with that, allowed people to be so much more open to his challenge and him being kind of tough. And I've tried to learn from that to say, frame why you're doing what you're doing, and then I think people are going to be more open to it. So that's one thing when you said that I thought about. I know it is time that we need to finish because I see something in front of me saying finish. But while we do that, I'm just going to ask 60 seconds from each of the panelists, closing comment. And if you don't mind, in those 60 seconds, saying, let's say we sit here in 2036, 10 years from now, how will you know that we've made progress on this issue of women and impact on boards?
So quite easy. If we see more than 30 to 40% female chairs of really relevant companies. So that is actually my hope. And I think everything starts with an ambition. So my wish is also for all the female board members to really formulate these ambitions and vision for themselves. Who do I want to be in this board, and what type of impact do I want to have?
Super. Thank you so much.
I will come back to what I said before, that we live in a better world than today. Maybe one of the key elements is to have more women on board. So I join you on that one. And one of the elements we didn't talk is how do we get more women on board, right? And I think I always think it with three elements, right? First of all, we need to educate the chairmen or whoever are the decision makers in the nomination committees, or potentially the companies like Egon and Zehnder that recommend people to better understand how they could put the woman in the front and value them as they are in the selection process. The second element, I think, is the whole environment needs to be friendly for women to get on boards, whether, I don't say quotas, but there needs to be an environment. And then the third is maybe the most important one, is we as women, do we show that ambition? Do we prepare ourselves? Do we want to go for it? And potentially, if we are a little bit afraid about the accountability or maybe the work that it generates, let's go over it. Let's be more of us willing and doing everything that counts to get on those boards.
Thank you.
I would join what Simone said. I think in 10 years, the real gap is the chair. So more chair position occupied by women. And not to repeat, we have said a lot. Maybe the last new thing I could bring is the importance to stay independent. Because I think if you really want to contribute in the quality of decision shaping, you need to be in a position, sometimes very courageous position, and courage. It's way easier if you don't need a board position. So I'm always trying to keep my core job, I think. And I would not be happy if I had just two boards positions and no other job. Or you have many, not too many, of course, 4 or 5, or it's better that you keep something else to be in that position.
Very good. Thank you. And again, I'm going to echo exactly what Simone said as well. For me, the real progress would be seeing more chairs of boards that are women. But we know it's a pipeline issue, right? The unspoken prerequisite for chairs is being a CEO. And so we need to get more female CEOs as well. And also, I want to see more male outspoken advocates. I don't like that this issue is often put on the women, right? I think this is an equality issue. It's an inclusion issue. It's not a woman's issue. The other thing I would say in closing, before we end, is that I study power. I said that earlier. And when I look at the world, also what's happening here in Davos, I see a need for, and I'm not going to say this is a woman's type of leadership, but a more feminine style of leadership. We need it now more than ever. More thoughtful, more questioning, more thinking about not making relationships happy, because we need the real psychological safety, but considering the relationships and those dynamics and how they affect the outcomes. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for having us. And I do hope to see you all here in 10 years.